A squirrel hunter in Brent, Alabama's Talladega National Forest made a horrifying discovery on November 9, 2015. At approximately 9 a.m., the mutilated and nude body of a woman was tied to a tree. When law enforcement officers got to the scene, they immediately got to work on the investigation. As soon as they started to doubt the victim's identity, Tuscaloosa County sent them a missing persons report for 29-year-old Samantha Payne, who turned out to be the victim. Investigators were soon led in a more unsettling direction by new evidence. Although initially it seemed as though Samantha was a part of a horrific ritual sacrifice. Was she really a ritual victim after all? Or was there a darker tale involving the cunning murderer hiding in plain sight? Today's case takes us to Tuscaloosa County in western Alabama, a significant hub for the state's business, education, and industrial sectors. With 227,000 residents, it is the fifth most populous county in Alabama. Tuscaloosa County is renowned for its picturesque landscape and designated wilderness areas. It is bordered by the Appalachian Mountains and the southern Gulf Coastal Plain. Additionally, the University of Alabama, a prestigious school and a significant employer in the area, is located there. Tuscaloosa County has a fair share of crime, just like the majority of other counties of similar size. However, as of 2023, the crime rate has significantly decreased due to law enforcement efforts. But in the fall of 2015, a pretty graphic murder that shocked the locals in Tuscaloosa County made headlines. On Monday, November 9, 2015, at 9 o'clock a.m., Jeffrey Elliott, a squirrel hunter, was traveling through the Talladega National Forest south of Tuscaloosa County. He came upon a horrifying scene as he got closer to a thicket of trees close to South Sandy Road. A woman's naked, disfigured, and headless body was bound with barbed wire to a tree. She lay with her head about 14 feet away from the tree. After a distraught Jeffrey called the Tuscaloosa County Sheriff's Office in a panic, deputies showed up on the scene shortly after. Investigators were taken aback by how violent the crime was. The woman's body was so severely decomposed and looked to have been severely beaten that the authorities realized it would be challenging to identify the victim. The body was brought to the Tuscaloosa County Medical Examiner's office along with the severed head. In an attempt to explain the grisly incident, investigators searched the area. Investigators ruled out the idea that the scene was a cult sacrifice ritual because there were no altars or other markers to indicate the location. The crime scene was searched, but no clues were found. There were no obvious drag marks or tire impressions. Neither identification papers nor personal items were found in the vicinity of the body. Due to a dearth of evidence, investigators had to entertain a different theory. The victim had been attacked elsewhere and then brought to the forest to be executed. The complete absence of forensic evidence baffled investigators, but two unexpected leads surfaced back at the sheriff's office, despite no evidence being found at the crime scene. Investigators learned of a missing persons report for Samantha Payne, a 29-year-old local woman, that same day. Suzanne Payne, her mother, stated that she had not seen her daughter since Friday, October 30, 2015. Although Samantha's photo could not be matched to the decomposed remains from the crime scene, there was a good chance that the victim was the missing woman. If the coroner's report could confirm that Samantha Payne was their victim, then the police would have to rely on it. Dr. Stephen Dunton conducted the victim's autopsy. He found it difficult to pinpoint the victim's identity and the precise cause of death. This was caused by the victim's severe injuries and mistreatment in addition to the decomposed state of the remains. This included 4 broken ribs and multiple lacerations on the skin caused by a sharp object. Her teeth had been extracted, along with her finger and toenails. The most perplexing finding, though, was the absence of her internal organs. Dunton was unable to establish whether the victim's organs were harvested by a murderer or scavenged by untamed animals, but it was clear that this was a homicide based on the manner the body had been tied to a tree and dismembered. DNA was taken from the body by the coroner and sent to be tested on Samantha's relatives. A sheriff's deputy from nearby Hale County called in to report an intriguing piece of information while Tuscaloosa County investigators awaited a positive identification. Concerned neighbors close to the Talladega National Forest had reported an odd car that had been abandoned along South Sandy Road approximately 10 days prior. The deputy discovered a couple strolling by the side of the road and stopped to talk with them after going to look into the matter. The deputy reported to the police that the two individuals had given their names as Stephen George, 27, and Chili Bruce, 18. The deputy saw that their clothes were stained with blood, despite their claims that they had run out of gas and had to leave their car and walk home. After searching the two, he discovered that they were carrying crystal. The deputy informed the investigators that Charlie and Stephen had been taken into custody at the Hale County Jail on charges of drug possession. Stephen and Chili were visited by detectives from the Tuscaloosa County Sheriff's Office at the Hale County Jail early on November 10, 2010. They both acknowledged that Samantha Payne was a friend of theirs when asked if they knew her. When investigators questioned Stephen and Chili about any information they had regarding the remains found in the forest, they unexpectedly confessed that the body found there was Samantha's. Furthermore, they acknowledged their involvement in the events that preceded her demise. They insisted, though, that they had nothing to do with her death. Rather, they accused Michael David Belcher, a 31-year-old friend of theirs. Investigators were told by Chili that Michael and Samantha were friends after their previous relationship ended. After Samantha threatened to report Michael to the police for stealing her car, Michael made the decision to kill her on Sunday, November 1st, 2015. In addition, Chili gave investigators important information when she revealed that Michael was the rightful owner of the car she and Stephen had abandoned close to Talladega National Forest. She said that there was evidence in the car linking him to the murder. Investigators had a starting point with Chili's statement, but her cryptic answer suggested there was more to the story than what she had revealed. Stephen and Chili were taken to the Tuscaloosa Sheriff's County Jail by investigators, where they were charged with capital murder and detained without bond while awaiting additional questioning. The Tuscaloosa County Sheriff's Office also received Michael's car, which had been impounded in Hale County. Investigators discovered that their suspects were telling the truth after entering the vehicle registration number through the system. It is true that Michael Belcher owned the car. The investigators got ready for a challenging assignment as well. They had to break the news to Samantha's family that their lovely daughter had died horribly. On October 30, 1986, Samantha Christine Payne was born in Dallas County, Alabama. She was raised in a loving family consisting of her sister Katrina, two brothers, Stephen and Jonathan Payne, and her parents, Roy and Suzanne Payne. Samantha's family said she was understanding and forgiving. She had put a lot of effort into her part-time jobs to pay for her college education. She had a reputation for cherishing her friends and giving thoughtful gifts. But Samantha had joined the wrong crowd in her mid-20s and began dabbling with crystal. Samantha's parents had made a concerted effort to assist her in breaking the habit, but she was unable to separate herself from her questionable new group of friends. The distraught parents were questioned by investigators regarding the last day they had seen her alive. Samantha's mother, Suzanne, stated that on October 30, 2015, she had gone to a Halloween party. On that day, Samantha turned 29. She wanted to dress like Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, but she was afraid her friends would make fun of her. Since it was her birthday, Suzanne had consoled her daughter and told her to go enjoy herself. Samantha's parents never thought it would be the last time they would see their daughter as a beaming Samantha left the house. A warrant was issued for Michael Belcher's arrest based on the information that Chili and Stephen provided. Michael was brought in for questioning at the Tuscaloosa County Sheriff's Office on November 11, 2015, but he was uncooperative right away. Even though he denied knowing Samantha's whereabouts and steadfastly refused to acknowledge his role in the murder, the investigators' investigation was not yet at a standstill. Given that Stephen and Chili had already admitted to seeing Michael kill Samantha, investigators attempted a different approach. They made a plea agreement with Stephen and Chili, offering them a lighter sentence in court in exchange for their testimony against Michael. They both nodded, and the harrowing account of what transpired before Samantha's murder started. Stephen and Chili claimed that they had continued their drug-fueled party with Michael and Samantha on Halloween night well into the next day, well past midnight. Two additional friends, Alyssa Watson, 22, and Marcus George, 34, joined them. All six of them were smoking meth on the evening of November 1, 2015, at Michael's father's motorcycle repair shop. Michael was regarded as their ringleader by the group, who frequently congregated at the store. Stephen proposed to the group that they take Samantha's car when she went to use the restroom. After removing the keys from Samantha's purse, Stephen and the other three men drove off with the vehicle. Samantha did not seem to care about the men's absence when she got back, and she did not even realize her car was missing. The men eventually made their way back and resumed smoking meth. Stephen revealed to Chili and Alyssa that they had taken Samantha's car's battery and catalytic converter before setting it on fire. Samantha did not realize her car was gone until much later, right before they were going to leave. She asked her friend about it, but everyone laughed at her car. Samantha finally threatened to call the police on them as she grew angrier and more impatient. According to Chili, this was the point at which everything began to go wrong. Michael was aware that they would not be able to get Samantha's burned car back, and that if Samantha reported the incident to the police, they would face charges for both meth possession and vehicle theft. Michael then seized Samantha and threw her to the ground. After he repeatedly punched and kicked her until her face was covered in blood, the group loaded her into Michael's car trunk and drove around for hours while Samantha sobbed. However, her night of agony was far from over. After some time, the group reached Michael's residence. Michael gave Samantha the order to undress before they entered. Samantha's humiliation at having to enter the house nude in front of her friends was intolerable. Samantha's feet and wrists were restrained inside the home with a belt, shoelaces, and cable. Again, for hours on end, she was beaten by the group. Samantha's survival was not an option, in Chili's own words. Once more, they placed Samantha in Michael's vehicle's trunk and proceeded to the Talladega National Forest, the site of the ultimate act of this horrifying brutality. While being driven, Samantha had hurt herself trying to get out of the trunk, but the five suspects forced her back in and struck her with sticks until she stopped talking. When they arrived at the forest, they pulled her over to the tree. With the last of her strength, Samantha tried to scratch Michael's face to get away, but they caught her, hit her again, and used barbed wire to tie her to the tree. Samantha had begged them to stop during this terrible ordeal, Chili recalled, and she had promised to forgive them and never tell anyone if they let her go. However, her cruel captors disregarded her cries. Samantha had scratched Michael, so Alyssa and Chili made the decision to use a knife to remove her fingernails and toenails in order to destroy any DNA evidence that might have been gathered under her nails. The woman even took it a step further and used pliers to extract a few of her teeth. Samantha kept telling them she loved and forgives them throughout the entire scenario. After that, the group watched as Michael began to cut Samantha in various places on her body. Samantha eventually ran out of strength after being tortured for hours. At that moment, Michael stabbed Samantha in the neck, severing her throat. The graphic details that Chili and Stephen had provided, as well as the hours of suffering Samantha had gone through, unsettled the investigators. Investigators executed search warrants for Michael's vehicle and residence in an effort to bring her justice. They discovered an automobile battery in Michael's home, exactly as Chili and Stephen had said. They discovered blood-stained women's clothing in Michael's car. DNA testing using samples from Samantha's parents revealed that Samantha's body was the one discovered in the forest. Samantha's blood was also consistent with the blood on Chili and Stephen's clothing, as well as the women's clothes from Michael's car. Alyssa and Marcus, the other two suspects, were also taken into custody on November 13, 2015. Their statements were consistent with those given by Chili and Stephen. Marcus and Alyssa were placed under bond for $60,000 after being accused of first-degree kidnapping. As Stephen had informed investigators, Samantha's burned-out car was discovered beneath the Harrisburg Bridge in Bibb County, Alabama. Equipped with the tangible proof and the admissions from all four suspects in Samantha's homicide, detectives questioned Michael once more. He persisted in denying any involvement, but it soon became evident that there was sufficient evidence for the authorities to imprison him for murder. Then, when Michael allegedly called his mother to ask for advice, she reportedly advised him to be truthful. While he was incarcerated, Michael asked her to take care of his cat. Following his arrest, Michael was accused of capital murder, He was remanded without bond in detention. Investigators and prosecutors were forced to rely on the eyewitness accounts of the four other suspects prior to the case going to trial. Stephen and Chili had already consented to testify against Michael as important eyewitnesses and enter a guilty plea in exchange for a shorter sentence. If given the same plea agreement as Stephen, Michael consented to enter a guilty plea to the murderer. However, the prosecution flatly rejected his request. They desired the harshest penalty Alabama could offer him. Alyssa and Marcus declined the plea offers made by the prosecution, insisting instead on maintaining their innocence. Both were released from jail after paying their bonds. Judge Jim Quinn determined on December 22, 2015, that there was sufficient evidence to hold Michael Belcher, Chili Bruce, and Stephen George in custody while their cases were presented to a grand jury. The judge declared that a grand jury would hear the cases of Marcus George and Alyssa Watson during the same hearing. 18-year-old Chili Bruce entered a guilty plea to the charge of murder on January 15, 2016. She was given a 20-year prison sentence, but as a condition of the plea agreement, she would be eligible for parole in 5 years. She was also mandated to take part in the drug rehabilitation program at the Alabama Therapeutic Education Facility. Alyssa Watson and Marcus George were the first two to go on trial in November 2018. After rejecting the prosecution's plea deals, they both pleaded not guilty and claimed to have left the forest before Samantha's murder, but their gamble failed. Alyssa and Marcus had been involved in the entire situation, according to Chili's testimony. As proof that Alyssa and Marcus had been at the murder scene, the prosecution presented cell phone location data. Alyssa and Marcus were found guilty by the jury of first-degree kidnapping and felony murder. They were all given 30-year prison terms on December 17, 2018, for each of the charges. Later, the Alabama Court of Appeals maintained the 30-year sentence for murder but overturned the first-degree kidnapping conviction. Alyssa was about to give birth to a boy, and Marcus was a young father whose family needed him, so their families begged for forgiveness. While Marcus apologized to Samantha's family and expressed regret for his poor decisions, Alyssa chose not to speak during the trial. But in her address to the jury, Samantha's mother, Suzanne Payne, called Alyssa and Marcus two of the most callous and evil non-human creatures that had ever walked the earth and expressed her hope that they would always be haunted by Samantha's voice, pleading for mercy. Currently serving their sentences, Alyssa and Marcus are expected to be freed in 2048. With great anticipation, the trials for Michael Belcher, Stephen George, and Chili Bruce started in March 2019. Weeks after her arrest, Chili entered a guilty plea, and the jury upheld her 20-year sentence with 5 years of parole eligibility. A few days into the trial, Stephen, like Chili, entered a plea agreement and admitted to killing Samantha. He described in detail how Michael killed Samantha, and his indictment corroborated Chili's. Nonetheless, the jury concluded that he had been heavily involved in Samantha's demise. It was Stephen who proposed car theft and initiated the entire criminal activity. Therefore, the jury found Stephen guilty and gave him a life sentence in prison, even though they had promised him a reduced sentence. Thanks to the plea agreement, he barely avoided the death penalty. Michael Belcher was next in line. The prosecution made their case and portrayed Michael as the gang's ringleader. The prosecution claimed that Michael had already planned to kill Samantha after the three men stole her car, based on the testimony of Chili and Stephen. His drug-induced rage had driven him to kill the young woman so violently out of fear of being discovered. Michael was given a death by lethal injection sentence on April 3, 2019, by Judge Brad Almond, following the jury's recommendation. At the sentencing hearing, Michael expressed his sincere apologies for Samantha's ordeal, saying that words could never fully capture his sorrow and grief. But Suzanne, Samantha's mother, did not think Michael could really feel regret for what he had done. At the age of 26, Chili will be released on probation in late 2023. Michael is incarcerated at home in prison on death row, and Stephen is still there for life. The sorrow of Samantha's passing will always be with her family. After Michael Belcher's trial and sentencing, Suzanne Payne talked to the media about her life without Samantha. She cried as she recalled how unique her daughter was. She was always able to find the good in everything and was quick to smile. It has been said by Samantha's parents that losing their daughter was like having no sun in the summer and no cold in the winter. Since that was also the last time they ever saw their daughter alive, they still mourn her loss every Halloween when it is her birthday. To ensure that Samantha's legacy endures, Suzanne has devoted her life to sharing her story. The risks of putting our trust in individuals who might not be acting in our best interests are brought to light by our case today. Samantha was the kind of person who did not see the negative aspects of people, which made her an easy target, according to what friends and family have said about her. Ultimately, her assassins used her innocence and good nature as leverage to take her life.